Let me tell you a story about a mortal girl who stepped into a world where monsters were masks of beauty, and love had a price. Feyre Archeron, our heroine. A mortal girl hardened by hunger, carved from survival, and driven by a promise. She once whispered to her dying mother. At 19, she is the sole provider for her broken family. Quietly fierce, defiant, and full of steel, with a bow in her hands, she hunts to keep them alive, even if it means risking the wrath of creatures no human should ever provoke. Tamlin Hi-Fi. Powerful, golden-haired, and cursed with a beast's rage. His heart is wrapped in thorns, and his past is weighed down by a curse that time is running out to break. He is the lord of the Spring Court, and the one who will tear Feyre's world apart. Lucien Tamlin's right hand. Witty, sharp-tongued, and bitterly scarred. He hides pain behind smirks and wears loyalty like armor. But there's more to him than what meets the eye. Rhysand, the dark prince of the Night Court. Beautiful and cruel. Or so it seems. His power radiates like shadow and stars, and he sees things others miss. Nesta and Elaine, Feyre's sisters. Nesta, cold and sharp as frost. Elaine, warm and gentle, like spring rain. Both are beautiful. Both rely on Feyre to survive, even if they never say it. The fairy world Prythian. Divided into 7 courts: spring, summer, autumn, winter, day, night, and dawn. A land where hi-fi reign, ancient power stirs, and something wicked festers in the shadows. Under the mountain, and above them all, Amarantha, the queen of cruelty, a creature of rage and rot, draped in beauty and dripping with blood. Her rule suffocates Prythian in darkness, and her curse hangs like a blade above them all. Now, let's begin the story from the very start. The forest had become a world of ice. The trees were naked and skeletal, their brittle limbs black against a sky the color of pewter. Wind hissed between the trunks, dragging curls of snow in its wake, whispering secrets no one dared to hear. Feyre Archeron moved like a shadow through the thickets, one hand on her bow, the other brushing snow off her lashes. Every breath stung her lungs. Every step crunched through the crusted snow. Her fingers, stiff and raw inside fraying gloves, barely kept hold of the bowstring. She had been out for hours, too long. Her stomach gnawed at itself, empty and aching, and the memory of their last scrap of bread gone yesterday only made the hunger worse. Her mind ticked over the dwindling supplies back home. No flour, no meat, barely enough oil to light a lamp. Her sisters were waiting in the cottage. So was her father, and none of them had eaten. Winter was a death sentence if you weren't clever, fast, or merciless. That's why she'd come this far into the woods, farther than she should have, past the territory where other hunters dared tread. Here, even the deer were cautious. Even the wolves were predators of legend. But Feyre had nothing left to lose, only something left to protect. A flicker of motion caught her eye. She crouched behind a wall of brambles, careful not to snap a single twig. Across the small clearing, a doe stood at the edge of a frozen brook, fragile, desperate, nosing at bark and brittle twigs. Thin but alive, meat and hide and salvation, all wrapped in soft brown fur. Feyre's breath hitched. Her fingers found the fletching of an arrow. She could already imagine it, the weight of the carcass slung over her shoulder, the taste of roasted venison in her mouth, the look on Elaine's face when she saw food again, the warmth in Nesta's voice when she finally ate. Her father might even smile. She drew the bowstring back, every movement silent, slow, controlled. But then, something shimmered in the shadows. Eyes, golden, too large, too knowing. The air snapped cold in her throat as a great wolf stepped into view. Fur dusted with snow, limbs like tree trunks. It moved silently, impossibly so, a shadow among shadows. It was not just a wolf. It was bigger than any natural beast had a right to be. Its gaze was sharp, not wild, but intelligent, ancient. The stories stirred in Feyre's memory. Old tales whispered by firelight. Creatures that could glamour themselves in any shape. Eyes that could burn into your soul. Feyre. Her hand shook on the bowstring. If it was a fairy, she was already dead. But it moved like a wolf, looked like a wolf. Maybe it was just a beast. Maybe. And if it killed the doe, her family would starve. She had one ash arrow, one iron-tipped shaft she'd bartered for years ago, thinking it was a foolish waste of coin. But now, it might be the only thing that could make a difference. She knocked it, took aim, and let it fly. The arrow struck the wolf's side with a sickening thud. Blood sprayed across the snow, ruby against white. The beast howled, turned to her with fury and betrayal flashing in its golden eyes. It didn't run. It didn't attack. It looked at her, as if trying to understand. Then she shot again, straight through the eye. The wolf collapsed in the snow, twitching, still alive. She approached, blade in hand, heart pounding, even dying. It didn't make a sound. Its chest rose, fell, then stilled. She stared down at it, its blood steaming in the cold, its eye glassy and open, was still watching the sky, and for a heartbeat, she wished she could feel something for the creature she'd killed, but she couldn't afford guilt. Not today. This was survival. The dough was heavy across her shoulders, but Feyre didn't care. The cold bit at her cheeks, and snow slid into her boots, but she didn't slow. Her arms burned, her back screamed. Still, she didn't stop. She skinned the wolf to carefully, quickly. The pelt was thick and fine. It would fetch coin, maybe even enough for oil and salt. The world around her was silent, the kind of silence that presses in thick, heavy, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Somewhere in the distance, something screamed, but she kept walking, because home, her crumbling, miserable home, was waiting. Their cottage sagged under the weight of frost and time, stone walls cracked with age, the roof patched with tar and hope. Smoke curled weakly from the chimney, but inside, it was barely warmer than outside. She shoved the door open, dragging the deer behind her. Elaine looked up from the hearth and gasped. "Where did you get that?" she asked, voice tight with hunger. Feyre didn't answer. Nesta didn't look up. She sat with her arms folded, eyes hard, jaw tight. Their father, a thin man with a twisted leg and hollow eyes, offered a faint smile from his chair by the fire. His beard was neat, his hands were clean. He hadn't lifted an axe in months. "Feyre," he murmured, as if the sight of the deer was a vision. "What fortune?" Feyre dropped the carcass on the table with a dull thud. The girls flinched. Blood pooled beneath the body, seeping into the old wood. The wolf pelt, still wet, slid to the floor. "I hunted," Feyre said simply. That was all. No complaint, no praise. She peeled off her soaked cloak and reached for her skinning knife. That night, they ate well. Venison sizzled over the hearth fire, and the scent filled the room like a dream. For once, the silence was full, not from tension, but from chewing. Even Nesta stopped scowling. Elaine smiled softly. Their father nodded, saying nothing, as if he didn't want to break the spell. Feyre barely tasted her food. She was thinking about the wolf, about the golden eyes. Something about that beast had unsettled her deeply. The next morning, Feyre wrapped the hides and walked to the market, snow crunching under her worn boots. Nesta and Elaine came too, curious about what they could wheedle from her earnings. The town was gray, lifeless. Houses leaned with exhaustion. Smoke drifted from crooked chimneys. Children huddled in blankets. Everyone looked hungry. As they passed through the village square, a voice rang out, "May the immortal light shine upon thee." A woman in silver robes stood with a group, all pale, radiant, fanatical. "The children of the blessed, fairy worshippers," Nesta sneered. "Get out of our way." But the woman stepped closer. "Have you heard the word of the blessed? The Fae can bring peace, comfort. They bring death." Nesta snapped. "They're monsters." The woman touched a bracelet of real silver on her wrist. "Not all of them. They eat us, enslave us," Nesta said coldly. "Maybe you should go offer yourself to them and see what happens." Feyre pulled her sister away before the shouting started, but she didn't look back, because somewhere inside her, a seed of doubt had been planted. The fountain in the middle of the square. Feyre approached a woman she'd never seen before, huge, scarred, draped in furs and blades. A mercenary. Feyre offered the hides. The woman inspected them especially. "The wolf. Where did you get this?" the mercenary asked. Feyre hesitated. "The forest. I hunted it." "Not just a wolf," the mercenary muttered. "These aren't normal tracks we're seeing. The things coming through the wall lately." She trailed off, eyes scanning the trees beyond the market. Feyre stiffened. "What things?" The woman leaned close. "Stay away from the wall, girl. Stay far away. Whatever's happening in Prythian, it's spreading." Then she handed Feyre a pouch of coins, a generous amount. "Take care of yourself," the mercenary said, her voice low and grim. "And pray you never see a hi-fi." Feyre walked home with gold in her pocket, and a coldness in her spine that had nothing to do with snow. By the time they returned home, the sun was already low in the sky. Shadows crawled over the floorboards of the cottage, and the hearth fire had burned low. Feyre counted out the coins carefully, dividing them into small piles. Enough for flour, some salt, maybe new boots if she bargained hard. But the moment the pouch opened, Nesta's eyes flicked to the money. Cold, calculating. I could use a new cloak, she said flatly, her voice too casual to be innocent. Elaine chimed in gently, and maybe some sugar. Just a little? It's been so long. Feyre didn't reply. She'd heard it all before, the soft petitions, the sharp demands. She knew what her sisters truly wanted. Not warmth, not safety. They wanted to forget the hunger, the loss, the filth and splinters and shame, but forgetting didn't feed them. So Feyre just pocketed the coins, stood up from the table, and grabbed an armload of firewood. I'll be back, she muttered. And no one offered to help, not even when she stepped back into the cold. That evening, dinner was quiet, too quiet. The stew steamed gently, the fire cracked and popped. The shadows deepened. Feyre had just finished scraping the bottom of her bowl when the wind howled loud and sharp, like a scream. The cottage groaned under the force of it. Then the door exploded open, wood splintered, snow blasted inside in a furious whirl, and in the threshold stood a monster, golden fur, antlers like a stag, claws like curved daggers, a wolf's head, but larger, far larger. His eyes glowed with intelligence and rage. The bowls crashed to the floor. Elaine shrieked. Nesta scrambled backward, pulling their father with her. Only Feyre stood rooted by terror, but still standing. The beast stepped fully inside. The earth trembled beneath its weight. His voice boomed like thunder. Murderers. Feyre's heart stopped. The wolf. The one she'd killed. The one whose pelt now lay drying by the hearth. He had come for vengeance. Feyre drew her hunting knife, the only weapon she had. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was sure. The beast snarled. Who killed the wolf? His voice was low now, guttural, like it had been forced through the snarl of a bear. Feyre glanced just once at her sisters, who were huddled against the hearth like mice. Then she stepped forward and said, I did. The beast growled. Snow melted beneath him. You killed one of my kind, one of my people, and for that, by the laws of the treaty, a life must be paid. Feyre swallowed. I didn't know. The beast's voice was cold as stone. You knew what you were doing. You used ashwood, iron. You knew exactly how to kill a fairy. Feyre didn't answer. She'd made her choice that day in the snow. And now, the consequences had come knocking. The beast's eyes narrowed. You have two options, human. His voice was calm, measured, but behind it was death. 1. I kill you now, in accordance with the treaty. He stepped closer. Feyre didn't flinch, though every part of her screamed to run. Or 2. You come with me, to Prythian, across the wall. You live there for the rest of your mortal days, away from your family, your kind. A life for a life. Silence fell. Elaine sobbed. Their father coughed, barely able to rise from his seat. Go, Feyre, he said, voice hoarse. If it will spare you, go. Feyre looked at them, all of them, and felt nothing but the echo of an old promise. Take care of them. Her mother's dying words, even if they never thanked her, even if they never loved her for it. Still, she would keep her vow. She nodded once, and walked toward the beast. They didn't embrace her. And no one wept. Nesta looked away. Elaine clutched her father. Feyre didn't say goodbye. She just turned, and stepped into the snow behind the beast. They traveled for hours, days maybe. Feyre lost track. She clung to the beast's fur as he bounded through forest and frost, the wind tearing at her clothes. They crossed a river that shimmered silver beneath the moon, climbed a hill where the trees whispered in a language she couldn't understand. And then, the world changed. It wasn't a line, not a gate, not even a wall. Just a feeling, like stepping into a dream you couldn't wake from. The trees were taller, the snow glittered, the very air smelled sweeter, like honey and moonlight and wild roses. Prythian, the land of the Fae. When they arrived, the sun was rising over a valley of endless green. Nestled in the center was a manor elegant, enormous, wrapped in ivy and blooming with impossible roses. A waterfall sang nearby. Birds with iridescent feathers flitted through golden trees. It was the most beautiful place Feyre had ever seen, but her heart stayed heavy, because no matter how warm the sun was, how sweet the air smelled, she was still a prisoner. The beast, transformed, fur folding into flesh, antlers shrinking back, bones reshaping, and where the creature had stood, now stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with golden hair and green eyes, and a mask covering half his face shaped like spring leaves in polished gold. He extended a hand. I am Tamlin, he said, and Feyre said nothing. Feyre couldn't sleep. Night after night, she lay beneath velvet sheets, staring at the carved wooden ceiling as the wind whispered outside her window. Something was wrong in the spring court. She could feel it in the way the servants moved too quickly through the halls, heads down, mouths shut. In the way Lucien's jokes faded into silence. In the way Tamlin stared out into the distance, jaw tight, whenever he thought she wasn't looking, and no one would talk about the blight. And no one would tell her what it was, where it came from, or what it had to do with the masks still fused to their faces. She had to find answers, and she would find them. In the forest, Feyre remembered the old tales, half-whispered legends her mother used to mutter about while brushing her hair. One creature in particular, the Surreal, a fairy that answered questions. If you caught it, if you survived it, armed with her bow, iron-tipped arrows, and a plan, Feyre ventured deep into the woods beyond the manor. She set a trap with chicken guts and tangled snare lines, exactly as the stories had said. Then she waited, heart pounding, air thick and still, leaves rustled, twigs snapped, and then it appeared. A skeletal figure in tattered black robes floated into view, face obscured by a hood, its fingers long and yellowed like dead roots. Its mouth stretched wide with crooked teeth that grinned like a riddle. It stepped into her trap, and the snare pulled tight, caught. The Surreal shrieked a sound like tearing silk but did not fight. It only turned its hooded face toward her and whispered, "You desire information, human?" Feyre gripped her bow, voice shaking. "Tell me, what is the blight? What curse is on this land?" The Surreal tilted its head. "There is a curse," it rasped. "A mighty curse, forged by a woman of hatred and greed, one who dwells under the mountain." Feyre's blood ran cold. "Who?" "She calls herself Amarantha." The name hit like a thunderclap. "Who is she?" Feyre whispered. "A ruler of nightmares," the Surreal said. "A creature from the continent, who has made herself High Queen of Prythian." Feyre swallowed. "And Tamlin?" The Surreal grew still. "He is your protector, your heart's desire. Stay close to him, mortal girl, stay, and all will be right." Feyre blinked, confused. "Why?" But the Surreal only hissed, "Tell no one, and run." Before she could ask more, before she could untangle her trap, a branch snapped, and a scream tore through the woods. Something was coming, not Fey, not human, something monstrous. Feyre grabbed her bow, cut the rope, and fled, feet pounding the earth, breath ragged, pulse thundering in her ears. Branches whipped her face, brambles tore her legs. Behind her, snarls echoed, not one, but many. She had no time to hide, no time to think. She was going to die, until a golden blur crashed through the trees. Tamlin in his beast form, fur rippling, fangs bared, claws slashing, he ripped the attacking creatures apart like paper. When it was over, the snow was soaked in blood. Feyre collapsed to her knees, chest heaving, unable to speak. Tamlin stood over her, panting, half shifting back into his humanoid form. "What the hell were you doing?" he snarled. "I needed answers," she whispered. "You wouldn't tell me anything." His eyes burned. "So you went after the Surreal? Alone? You're lucky to be alive." Feyre didn't look away. "I got what I needed." Tamlin's jaw worked. Then softly, he said, "Don't ever do that again." And when he walked away, the forest felt a little darker. Spring arrived with a shudder. The trees burst into bloom. The fields turned golden with wildflowers. Warm breezes replaced the cold. Feyre had almost forgotten how good sunlight could feel. But along with the warmth came something else, power. The day of Calanmai, the spring solstice, was fast approaching. Feyre noticed it in the way magic hummed through the air, in the way Tamlin's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table, in the way Lucien grew quiet, watchful. "What's Calanmai?" she asked over dinner. Lucien winced. "You don't want to know." Tamlin said nothing. Later, she overheard servants whispering, "The great rite." They told her to stay in her room, to lock the door, to not come out until dawn. So, naturally, Feyre left the manor. She followed the sound of music, drums pulsing like a heartbeat, laughter drifting through the trees. She found a meadow lit by fire. Fairies danced around bonfires, their bodies glowing with magic, their eyes glazed, their smiles too wide. A festival, a ritual. She watched, hidden among the trees, until a fairy approached, handsome, smiling, eyes too dark. "You're not from here," he said, brushing a hand over her hair. She backed away, but he grabbed her wrist. "Let go," she snapped. He leaned in. "You smell human." Panic clawed up her throat. Before she could scream, a voice cut through the night. she's with me. Tamlin, not just glowing burning, power radiated off him like heat from a forge. The other Fae stumbled back, and Tamlin seized Feyre's arm. I told you to stay in your room, he growled. She didn't answer, but she noticed his eyes how dark they'd gone, how his teeth were a little sharper. Later that night, Feyre walked alone through the halls of the manor, her skin still tingling from the bonfire heat. She stopped to catch her breath in the garden. Tamlin found her there. He didn't speak at first, just walked up behind her, and then, he said, voice low, rough, hungry, I've been looking for you. Feyre turned, startled. He was so close, his eyes burned gold in the moonlight. I needed to find you, he whispered. That night, the magic, it calls to us, drives us wild, but I held back. I didn't choose anyone. He cupped her cheek. His hand was warm, gentle. I waited, because I knew I'd find you. And then, he kissed her. Feyre melted. It was fire and wind and lightning. It was years of hunger and loneliness collapsing into one perfect moment. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was the only thing keeping him alive. When they finally pulled apart, Feyre could barely stand. I should go, she whispered. Tamlin didn't stop her, but his eyes followed her all the way back to her room. Feyre didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lit a candle, opened her box of paints, and pressed her brush to the wall above her bed. She painted a golden field of roses, a moonlit kiss, a burning touch, her story in color, her soul in strokes, and for the first time in years, she felt like someone had finally seen her, not as a burden, not as a killer, but as a woman worth saving. The days after Calanmai were golden, sunlight poured through the windows each morning. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and honey. Feyre spent her time in the gardens, fingers stained with paint, listening to the wind whistle through the hedges. Tamlin brought her fresh canvases, brushes with sable bristles, jars of color she couldn't name. Sometimes he sat beside her and watched her paint. Sometimes he said nothing at all, just looked at her like she was something rare and delicate, like he couldn't believe she was real. He began to smile more. So did she. Lucien, ever the fox, teased them both relentlessly. You'll be writing poetry next, he said one morning as he caught them walking by the reflecting pools. Feyre rolled her eyes. I'd rather be impaled. Tamlin chuckled. She's got spirit, I'll give her that. But even laughter couldn't silence the tension that simmered just beneath the surface in the way Tamlin's eyes flicked toward the woods too. Often, in the long silences after the servants left the room, something was still wrong in the spring court, and Feyre couldn't stop feeling it. One morning, Feyre found Lucien sitting alone by the stables, sharpening a blade that glowed faintly blue. His fox mask glinted in the sun. You look like you're going to war, she said. He didn't smile. There's always a war coming, Feyre. She hesitated, then sat beside him. Tell me the truth, she said. What's happening here? What is the blight really? Lucien stared at the blade, his jaw tight. The mechanical eye in his face clicked softly as it shifted toward her. Tamlin is cursed, he said finally. All of us are. Feyre's blood ran cold. Cursed? By what? Lucien hesitated. Then quietly he said, there's a woman. A Fae from across the sea. She calls herself Amarantha. She's not just powerful, she's cruel, twisted. Is she the reason for the masks? Lucien nodded. Yes, and more than that. She took Tamlin's lands, shattered his court, and gave him a window, a sliver of time to break the curse. Feyre's heart pounded. What kind of curse? Lucien looked at her, and for a long, terrible moment, he didn't speak. Then he rose. Ask Tamlin, he said, and walked away. That afternoon, Feyre found Tamlin by the lake, standing in the shallows, barefoot and silent, his tunic clung to his skin and water lapped around his ankles. She didn't speak at first, just watched the light glint off the gold in his hair, the way his shoulders curled slightly inward, as if the weight of the world was slowly breaking him. I know something's wrong, she said softly. Tell me. Tamlin looked at her. His eyes were tired. I can't, he said. It's part of the curse. I can't speak of it. Then let me help. He stepped toward her. You already are. And then he kissed her. This time it was different. Slower, deeper. A kiss full of everything they'd left unsaid: grief, longing, hope. A kiss that made the world fall away. They didn't speak after that. Words were no longer needed. The next morning, Feyre woke to silence. The manor was still, the halls to quiet, and when she found Tamlin in the rose garden, he wouldn't meet her eyes. What's going on? She asked. I'm sending you home, he said. Feyre stared at him. What? You're not safe here. No, she said, stepping toward him. You said I was safe. You promised. There are things coming, Feyre. Things I can't stop. If you stay, you'll die. I don't care. I do. His voice broke. I love you, he said, barely audible. So I'm letting you go. Feyre shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. Please don't do this. Tamlin stepped forward and cupped her face in his hands. I'll find you again, he whispered, and then she was gone. The cottage hadn't changed. The roof still sagged. The wind still slipped through the cracks. The scent of mildew still clung to the walls, but Feyre had changed. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She didn't speak. Her sisters hovered, concerned. Her father watched her like she was made of glass, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Tamlin, his hands, his eyes, his voice. She should have said it back. She should have told him I love you. One evening, Feyre wandered into the woods. Not to hunt, not to escape, just to breathe. Nesta found her there, and said something that shattered everything. I remember, she whispered. The glamour, the magic. It didn't work on me. Feyre froze. I knew you were gone. I knew you were with them. Why didn't you stop me? I tried, Nesta said. I went to the wall. I couldn't get through. Feyre stared at her sister, stunned. I thought you hated them, she said. I do, Nesta replied. But I hate the idea of you dying even more. The words were rough, awkward, but real. Feyre looked north toward the invisible line that marked the edge of Prythian. She remembered Tamlin's face, and then she turned and ran. The spring court was burning, not in fire, but in silence, in absence, in the way the doors hung open, the flowers wilted, the tapestries torn. Feyre raced through the halls, heart hammering. No nothing, until a voice faint, rasping called out from beneath a broken archway. A fairy, half dead, his skin burned and peeling. He grabbed her wrist with bloodied fingers. They're gone, he croaked. Taken. Where? Feyre whispered, dreading the answer. His lips trembled. Under the mountain. The journey was cold, not from the air but from within. Feyre passed through mountains wreathed in clouds, forests that had gone silent, rivers black as spilled ink. The land felt thinner here, darker, like something ancient had sunk into the roots and stone and whispered madness. She followed no map, only instinct, only dread, until she reached it, the mountain, a black peak that clawed at the sky, jagged as broken glass, snowless and bare. At its base, a hollow opening, wide as a cathedral and just as silent. Something inside it pulsed, alive, hungry. Feyre didn't hesitate. She stepped through. The interior of the mountain was lit by strange, flickering flame green and gold, casting long, haunted shadows on the carved black stone. The smell hit her first, blood, rot, and something sweet and cloying. Incense masking decay. Then the sound, laughter, music, screams. The main chamber was massive, a throne room cut from obsidian, dripping with torchlight and gilded bone, and at the center, a throne of roots and antlers and skulls. Upon it sat a woman, red hair flowing over her shoulders, skin pale and perfect, lips blood-stained and smiling like a predator who has already fed. Amarantha. She wore a crown of bone, a gown that shimmered like spider silk, and a face that hid nothing of what she truly was. She was beautiful and monstrous. At her feet, slumped like a broken doll, was Tamlin, mask still in place, face blank, eyes dead. The guards dragged Feyre into the room. Lucian stood among the courtiers, his face bloody, eye flickering with fury. He tried to move toward her, but Amarantha only flicked her hand, and he froze in place. Tamlin said nothing, not a word, not a flicker of emotion, and that hurt worse than the bruises. Amarantha rose from her throne, her movements elegant, even lovely. You killed my pet, she said. Feyre swallowed hard. I came to free Tamlin. The court burst into cruel laughter. Amarantha circled her like a cat. Oh, the mortal girl thinks she can break the curse, she purred. Do you even know what the curse is? Feyre stood tall. Then tell me. No laughter. Again. You want to save him? Amarantha asked, eyes alight with cruelty. Then let's play a game. She offered Feyre a deal. 3 trials, survive them all, and Tamlin would go free. Or, answer one riddle, get it right and all debts would be forgiven. Feyre barely breathed. I accept. Amarantha smiled wider. Wonderful. And then snapped. Feyre's nose with a flick of her power. Blood poured down her face as she collapsed to the floor. They threw her in a pit of stone. No windows. No bed. Just damp walls and filth. Days passed or maybe hours. She couldn't tell. Her head throbbed. Her ribs ached. They gave her moldy bread, cloudy water. Her thoughts drifted like leaves. Tamlin hadn't spoken. Why hadn't he spoken? Why had he let her suffer? The first trial came without warning. They dragged her into a chamber deep within the mountain, a pit, filled waist-high with thick, sucking mud, and from the far side, it emerged, the Midgard worm, a creature the size of a house, blind and hungry, with a mouth full of razored teeth and a hunger that had fed on Feyre for centuries. She had no weapons, just bones sharp and jagged, littering the ground. She ran, tripped, sank. The mud swallowed her screams, but she kept moving, stabbing bones into the ground, shaping a trap. The worm found her scent and charged, and when it lunged, it impaled itself on her bone trap. Its death scream shook the walls. Feyre collapsed, exhausted, broken, alive. Her wounds festered, her arm throbbed, twisted, bleeding, infected. She cried in the dark, begged, and someone answered. A figure stepped from the shadows of her cell, tall, elegant, wearing night like a cloak. Rhysand, High Lord of the Night Court. His eyes glittered like starlight, and his smile wasn't cruel. Not yet. I can save you, he said, but bargains must be made. Feyre's lips trembled. What do you want? He showed her his hand, perfect, pale, ringed in silver. 1 week a month, he said. In my court, forever. No, she said, then die. Her heart pounded. The infection was spreading. Her vision blurred. Fine. He grinned and pressed a finger to her arm. Dark ink swirled beneath her skin, shaping a black eye on her forearm. And with a snap of power, her arm was healed. The pain was gone, but she had made a bargain, one she would never escape. The second trial was worse. They brought her to a new chamber, smaller, with stone walls and an iron gate. Lucien was shackled on the far side. Above him, a ceiling of metal spikes began to lower. In front of Feyre, a puzzle. She had to solve the riddle to stop the spikes, but she couldn't read. The letters blurred, meaningless. She tried to guess, failed. The ceiling dropped faster. Lucien screamed behind his gag. Feyre panicked, until a whisper. Soft, smooth, familiar. Rhysand. He spoke the answer aloud. Feyre repeated it. The gate fell open. The spike stopped inches above Lucien's face. Feyre collapsed, shaking, and when the guards dragged her away, Rhysand watched from the shadows, his expression unreadable. After that, Amarantha's court changed. She summoned Feyre to attend her every night, not as a guest, but as a pet. Rhysand's pet. He claimed her in front of the court, painted her body in swirling blue symbols, dressed her in little more than mist and illusion. She was to sit at his side. To dance when he said dance. To drink what he gave her. To smile when she wanted to scream. But he never touched her, not once, and when her limbs trembled, her eyes glazed, her thoughts thick with magic, he always held her upright. And sometimes, when no one else could see, he whispered, I'm sorry. The final trial. Feyre stood in a circle of stone. 3 Fey knelt before her, bound, blindfolded, weeping. Amarantha handed her a blade. You want your freedom? She said sweetly. Then kill them. Feyre's hands shook. She couldn't. She had to. She sobbed, begged. But the Fey were innocent, unarmed. Kill them, Amarantha whispered. Or Tamlin dies. Feyre cried out, and plunged the blade into the first heart, then the second, and the third. The third was Tamlin. She froze, but something clicked. The curse, the riddle, the answer. Love. She whispered it aloud, and the mountain shook. Power surged. Tamlin roared, a sound that cracked stone and sky. His mask shattered, his body lit with golden flame. The curse was broken. He tore free of Amarantha's control, and when she lunged at Feyre to strike her down, he was there. Fangs, claws, light. Amarantha died screaming, but Feyre was already dying, broken, bloody, spine shattered. She watched the world through dimming eyes, and as the court surrounded her, silent with shock, the High Lord stepped forward. One by one, they touched her chest, pooled their power, gave her life, and when she woke, she was not mortal. She was High Fey. Tamlin carried her from the mountain. The sun was rising. The war was over. They kissed beneath the sky. But Feyre's heart was not whole, because she remembered Rhysand, the way he'd helped her, held her, given her strength. She remembered the way he'd stumbled when he saw her reborn, and the look in his eyes, like a soul recognizing its other half.